service.
That's true.
Looking forward to that. Well, as Nancy mentioned, our theme this month is pulled by pain, pushed by vision. The last few weeks we've looked at visioning. Could you put up my first slide, please? Thanks. And we heard from Reverend Pam about how sometimes it's the pain of being where we are currently stuck that makes us move forward. But there's also another motivation that takes place, and that is when we aspire to be more than we currently are. And this growth in consciousness, this growth in awareness can happen at the individual level as well as at a group level. Individually, we can make some evolutionary movements, and I'll be talking about that just a little bit. But also as an organization, the Centers for Spiritual Living has committed itself to moving forward and evolving into something bigger and better than what it currently is. So if you flip to the next slide, please, you'll see that we have a organizational vision, our global vision, and we'll be talking about that just a little bit later on in more depth. But part of that includes that we see ourselves changing over time, not staying the same, but taking effort to grow. And sometimes growth is hard. Sometimes growth is scary. Sometimes growth requires us to step outside of our comfort zone and take a leap of faith. And that is something that we'll be addressing here today. Consciousness is not a static thing. In fact, there are different ways to look at it. One person who looked at this was Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith. If you flip to the next slide, you see that he, in his book, Life Visioning, proposed that there is not one consciousness, but there are like levels of consciousness that we move through as we learn, as we grow, as we develop. And he called these the 4 stages of consciousness, 4 stages of spiritual growth. And, as a refresher for some and something brand new for others, I'm just going to spend a few minutes saying that these 4 stages are not a static thing. A person can actually slip up and back down again as they develop. But most of us start off feeling like a victim, feeling that the world is against us, that we have to work hard to protect ourselves, defend ourselves, to scratch out an existence. In this fundamental stage, it is all about things are happening to me. As we learn more, as we grow intellectually, as we grow physically, as we grow spiritually, we come to recognize that we have an opportunity to make changes for ourselves. We can control our environment to one degree or another. And as we learn more about the science of mind in particular, we know that our thoughts are leading us to different experiences and the demonstration of various things in our lives. And so here in the second stage, things are happening by me. I have an element of control over what happens. As we spend more time in our spiritual practices and in our development spiritually, we come to recognize that there's even yet a higher stage, a third stage. The third stage being cooperation with the divine, engaging with the divine in the creative process and bringing forth greater things, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. But in any cooperative undertaking, we recognize that there's not just one thing, there are 2. One cooperates with the other. These 2 work together. The highest level, and the level of spirituality achieved by very few, includes the Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, and others who have come to recognize that when we unify with God, when we connect at a very, not just connect at a level, we recognize that we are part of God and God is part of us. We lose that sense of disconnection. So no longer is it cooperation, but we are engaged in and as God works through us. And at that level, things happen as me, as the divine providing the direction and the energy makes things happen through our hands, through our mouth, through our actions during the day. And staying in that consciousness is the hardest thing to do. Why? Why? Because we live in an everyday world. You know, we walk around in human form. We have to eat. We have to sleep. We need, you know, our basic security needs. If you ever remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, there are things we have to do while we're here. And oftentimes we allow that steady stream of worldly demands to get into our thoughts, to get into our way of thinking, and push us back down into stage two. We forget. We forget. But, you know, even when we forget, even when we make mistakes, we can go back. We can recommit. We can forgive ourselves for having forgotten. And Lord knows each one of us has examples of that. And come back into oneness with the one. How do we do that, though? I mean, how do we stay in the awareness of our inner divinity and our desire to connect with that which is divine? I would suggest that having regular spiritual practice plays a key part in this. That having time each day, if not multiple times each day, to remind ourselves through meditation, through periods of prayer, through periods of spiritual reading, or other spiritual activities that are what ground you in the awareness of the divinity, or what keep us more likely than not to stay within that consciousness when the person in front of us runs a red light, or when a check bounces, or the actions of another person disappoint us, and we respond, or could respond, negatively instead of with love. I think I've shared once before how in a personal example of this, having a very difficult time using a rental truck to move flooring material from Reno to Truckee, where I live, and getting it back before the deadline. I didn't, mainly because the truck itself couldn't carry the weight that it was supposed to carry. And then it was traffic, and then there was a range of things that made me late getting it back. And as I drove down the road, I was rehearsing in my mind the angry words I was going to say. I was literally thinking about, how do I get my point across that your truck didn't work? I spent twice as much time. I missed a meal. I'm really, I'm hangry here. I'm hangry. And then a car cut in front of me and slammed on the brakes. Thankfully, I responded quickly enough to avoid hitting the car. But in my rage, looked down at the license plate, and it was one of those vanity plates with just the letters, and the letters spelled GDISLUV. God is love. Boy, oh boy, talk about the spiritual slap on the side of the head. I instantly knew I was steeped in my religious practices, my spiritual practice, to know that things don't happen by accident. And that this was a sign from the divine to get my head out of the gutter and get it back where it belongs, get it back to a place of love. I have to admit, I was still on an adrenaline rush from my angry thoughts. And so as I finished the drive to drop off the truck, I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to be fussy here. If they ask, I'll tell them what happened. We'll see what happens. And sure enough, as I handed the keys to the young lady behind the counter upon arrival, she asked the question, how did it go? And I kind of paused for a second and with a feeling of love. Like, it didn't go well. It didn't go well. I couldn't do what I planned to do because the truck couldn't carry it. And she looked like, oh, that's so sad. I'm so sorry. We're going to waive any cost for you in connection with this. We'd like to give you a store credit. We're so terribly sorry. And I realized as she mouthed those words, that's what I had planned on demanding. And the word, at least the attitude of love, gave me what it is I intended to bang on the desk and demand. There are no coincidences in the world. When we do this, when we steep ourselves in spiritual practices and recognize that we are part of something bigger, and we have a stake to play or part to play in the grand scheme of things, a different awareness comes to mind. We see through different eyes. Just another example here. Just yesterday, I sat at a picnic table with folks I had not met before, one of whom does soul collage work at the Tahoe Forest Cancer Center, where I volunteer. And somehow we got to talking about hospice. I volunteer with the hospice there. She volunteers at the hospice there, though our paths never did cross. And the fellow who was sitting across from me was listening to this, said, well, I had a bit of a hospice situation myself when I had to go help my mother in her transition. And he said, I'm so glad that I did. I was building a house at that time in another state, and I got injured on the job and couldn't work anymore on the house. So I figured I would go and convalesce with my mom. I could borrow her walker and take care of us both. The hospital that was going to do the necessary surgery had no openings for months. So he thought he was in for the long haul. He sat with his mom and gently spoke with her about the coming change. She had peace with it. And in time, she quietly passed. And he said that was the best experience of my life, having that time. What was stranger yet is that the next day, the hospital called to say that they have an opening. They can do my operation tomorrow. And I looked him in the eye and I said, there are no coincidences. And he gave me this quizzical look, and his eyes got wide. His eyes got wide, knowing that he was injured, he was there, and now that the need for him there had passed, the operation was literally the next day. Yeah, it's uncanny how it works. When we see with new eyes, actually see things that have been there all along. Ernest Holmes had something interesting to say about this. If you go to my next slide, please. There's a center in you that already knows what this existence is all about. And he encourages us to develop a consciousness that flows from this center, for it is the secret place of the Most High within you. Thank you, Sawyer. It is that part of us where what I call the soul, other folks have other definitions of it, and I consider it the intersection of the human and the divine within us. It is the place where the divine plan involves us, where we can go to access the knowledge that is not available to us here on earth, to find that connection with that which is divine. And that is something else that one of my favorite authors spends a lot of time on. Joel Goldsmith. I don't know if you've ever heard or read his works. And his short book, it has less than 100 pages. I highly recommend The Infinite Way. He talks to this idea of the interconnection between us and the divine, and how we have a role to play in the continued unfolding of consciousness by letting go of our ego, letting go of our need for control, and allowing spirit to work through us. It's incredible. When we choose to align with spirit, all wonderful things start to happen because we're working with the creator of the universe on moving the group forward. We come to see spirit as a flow, a flow of all the good things that Ernest Holmes talks about, all love and light and life, all peace and power and beauty and joy, all those things coming forth from spirit through us into the world. And when we allow it to happen, it's a wondrous experience. Now, we don't create those things. Those all come from God. But we can serve as channels for it. We can direct it. We can make it and help express it here on earth. And when we know that we are in the flow with the divine, we just feel and see and act in a way that is limitless, wondrous, amazing. When we accept that God is working through us, we get to know the peace and the comfort and the knowledge that what we are doing is divinely guided and it is as it should be. We don't have to worry about it anymore. We don't have to make it happen. All we do is live in the flow, live in the divine expression, and bring it forth here on earth. Joel Goldsmith has something great to say about this in the next slide. We are in the water of infinite life, just like a fish. Oh, that's Ernest Holmes, forgive me. We're in the water of infinite life as the fish is in the ocean. And this spirit of life is all around us. It flows through us and permeates everything. Thank you. Now we can go on to Joel. Next one, please. Yeah. Keeping our mind stayed on God leads us to an awareness, and sometimes even a voice inside. Sometimes it's a license plate in front of your face. And we know that he performeth a thing that is appointed for me to do. In the Bible, we read Jesus saying, "It is not I, but the Father within." who doeth the work, and you shall be able to do even more. He's telling us we can do it too. And so, what is ours to do? How do we do it? How do we keep our minds on God to the point that we allow the Spirit to work through us? Well, it's good to know that God is with us always. If we can hear from another wise one. Next slide. In a prayer. Yes. Paramahansa Yogananda, Heavenly Father, thy cosmic life and I are one. Thou art the ocean and I am the wave. We are one. God is just behind my reason today and every day, and is guiding me to do the right thing always. Touching word, thank you. When we know that we are in the arms of God, nothing's impossible. There's nothing we can't do. We're lifted up and out of our mundane, silly human existence into something even greater. That expression of all that is good. If we just keep our mind, keep our eye on the prize. And Michael Beckwith, where we started, he had some good words to say on this. There he is. As long as you're on the planet, you are here to deliver your gifts, your talents, and your skills with confidence and inner authority, withholding nothing. Yeah. When you walk holding the hand of God, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Anyway, I want to spend a minute, if you will, don't mind, looking at the Center for Spiritual Living global vision. So you get a sense of what we as an organization, what we as a larger world community are all about, what we see coming forth. And why don't I read it aloud? We envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. We see a world in which every person lives in alignment with his or her highest spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other, a world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. We envision humanity, thank you, next one. We envision humanity awakening to its spiritual magnificence and discovering the creative power of thought, a world where every person discovers his or her own personal power and ability to create an individual life that works within a world that works for everyone. Next. We envision a world in which we live and grow as one global family that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life, a world where this kinship with all life prospers and connects through the guidance of spiritual wisdom and experience. Next. We envision a world where personal responsibility joins with social conscience in every area of the political, corporate, academic, and social sectors, providing sustainable structures to further the emerging global consciousness. We envision a world where each person has enough food, a home, and sense of belonging, a world of peace and harmony, enfranchisement and justice. We envision a world in which resources are valued, cared for, and grown, and where there is generous and continuous sharing of these resources. We envision a world-wide culture in which forgiveness, whether for errors, injustices, or debts, is the norm. We envision a world which has renewed its emphasis on beauty, nature, and love through the resurgence of creativity, art, and aesthetics. Lastly, we envision a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. And so it is, so it is. Thank you.